And over the years, we've chatted with many Redditors, you've put your reviews up, we've talked to a lot of our customers about what they like about Tongkat Ali and what they don't like about Tongkat Ali. So a few things have come up, more experientially, people just reporting how they feel, but also blood tests. And two kind of big things that have come up is, one, after a while people start getting some joint issues, their libido goes down, they generally just don't feel as good. For anyone in the bodybuilding world, you probably recognize this as maybe a decrease in estradiol, and you would be correct. So estradiol is an estrogen, E2, and part of the way that Tongkat Ali increases testosterone is by lowering estradiol. Good for the most part until your estradiol levels really start to drop. And estradiol is important for men and women especially, but for men too, because estradiol has anti-inflammatory effects, it has mood boosting properties, it actually has anabolic properties, it's really good for libido, it protects your joints, it protects your bones. If estradiol levels really start dropping, a lot of people start to report some joint soreness, some decreases in libido, some decreases in mood. And this is quite a well-known phenomenon at this point, and there's been lots of work on Reddit being done. How do we counteract that? One of the ideas I had a couple of years ago is horny goatweed. Horny goatweed contains a compound called icarin, and icarin increases the activity of an enzyme called aromatase, and aromatase converts testosterone into estradiol. And one of the things that Tongkat Ali does is it inhibits the aromatase enzyme, and this is one of the ways in which it actually enhances testosterone. So that's a good thing. However, for some people it seems to be too much of a good thing, so we want to correct that a little bit. So we put a small dose of the horny goatweed 10% icarin extract in there. And the horny goatweed 10% we also find to have a really nice relaxing mood boosting effect. So that's also one of the reasons we put the 10% in there and not our 50% icarin extract, which we also carry. But the 10% specifically has a nice mood boosting property that we found worked well with the Tongkat Ali blend. But the real reason it's in there is to kind of counteract those decreases in estradiol, but not too extreme. And this seems to be working really well so far for the people who have been trying it. Another cool thing that the horny goatweed does is it is a PDE5 inhibitor. So PDE5 is an enzyme that breaks down a compound that dilates your blood vessels. And so basically, if you're taking nitric oxide boosters and things like that, one of the ways in which it increases vasodilation is by ramping up the production of cGMP, and cGMP eventually dilates your blood vessels. cGMP is broken down by PDE5, so if you take a PDE5 inhibitor, more cGMP, more vasodilation. There are many very famous PDE5 inhibitors. One of them starts with Vi, ends with Gra. You could probably figure that one out. So that's a really cool thing about horny goatweed. It enhances blood flow, which we'll touch on a little bit later, but that's obviously going to be good for erections, and Eurycomax is a really good libido booster, so that's an added bonus as well. Now, if we talk about libido, and that's obviously going to be a big part of any testosterone booster, one thing that also seems to happen with Tongkat Ali, with other testosterone boosters, is that prolactin goes up a little bit. And prolactin going up is not a good thing for libido. And I think this is why a lot of people have really good effects with Tongkat Ali, and then it turns on them. So in that beginning period, they're not having any issues with prolactin, maybe no issues with estradiol, but after a few weeks, after a few months, prolactin issues start to pop up, and some issues maybe with estradiol start to pop up. So how do we counteract this? Well, a really good way in which to counteract prolactin increases is by increasing dopamine, because dopamine has an antagonistic effect on prolactin. So if dopamine is high, prolactin is low. If dopamine is low, prolactin is high. So to ameliorate this effect, we put in some mucuna pruriens standardized for L-DOPA. Now we went for a very full spectrum mucuna pruriens, which only has 15% L-DOPA. So for those of you not in the know, straight L-DOPA, like if you have 98% L-DOPA, and you're taking high doses of it, it doesn't seem to be the best thing long term. There's definitely some concerns about that. L-DOPA is also used in the pharmaceutical industry, and we see issues with that in high doses. Now, with mucuna pruriens in lower standardization amounts, there's been a lot of scientific evidence for it not having some of those issues, especially if the overall dose of L-DOPA is low. So there is something to be said for taking mucuna pruriens that has not been over-extracted and over-purified, and there's something to be said for having a low overall dose. Now, L-DOPA, for those of you that don't know, is a direct precursor to dopamine. So usually how we make dopamine is we consume L-tyrosine, an amino acid that's found in our diet, and that L-tyrosine gets turned into L-DOPA through a rate-limiting enzyme. So that rate-limiting enzyme means that L-tyrosine conversion to L-DOPA, it just stops at a certain point. If there's too much L-DOPA, if there's too much if there's too much L-DOPA, that mechanism basically gets shut off, it gets saturated. So you can keep adding in more L-tyrosine, but nothing will happen. No extra conversion to L-DOPA will happen. Now with L-DOPA, you don't have a rate-limiting enzyme between L-DOPA and dopamine. You can keep feeding yourself as much L-DOPA as you want, and it will create as much dopamine as you want. And this is obviously where the issues come from, because too much dopamine is not good for you. Dopamine oxidizes, and then it becomes a very strong oxidant throughout your brain. It can cause some movement issues. Generally not a good thing to have just really, really high levels of dopamine floating around. But if you do that at a low level, having a little bit of L-DOPA is really cool, because you don't have to wait for that L-tyrosine to get converted to L-DOPA and then for that L-DOPA to get converted to dopamine. You just immediately have L-DOPA available, and that gives you a quick dopamine boost. And that's why I was saying earlier, you will probably be able to see us report an effect within about 30 minutes, but that effect is just going to be the L-DOPA.
I feel really good. I feel relaxed.
Oh, you feel it already?
I feel quite focused. I do. I do think I feel something. Oftentimes on the podcast, when I'm listening really carefully to this in-depth information, which is beyond my personal scope, you're the one doing all the heavy research, I can get a little bit bogged down or a little bit overwhelmed. But today I find that it's easy to follow along, so it's going really great. Nice work so far.
Nice.
And I also feel excited by the conversation so far.
Good.
This is not always the case, and I'm interested in the products, but sometimes just this relaxed listening position that I'm in makes it easy to kind of trail off and focus, and also to just settle into the couch. But today I don't feel that. I feel really present.
Nice.
And it's not overwhelming, and it's definitely not overstimulating either. So this is kind of in a happy middle ground.
Great.